Hello, everyone. Today is going to be our final video of the semester, and we are going to focus on the second part of the last assignment, which is your program evaluation proposal assignment. So I want you to think of this assignment as being a very brief outline, really like a fill in the blank exercise that you can really expand upon in the future. We've really done a lot this semester in terms of collecting qualitative data, developing a logic model, which is part one of your final assignment. And then part two is really filling in the blanks for this program evaluation proposal. So we aren't executing a full program evaluation in this class. We are just setting up the basics of an evaluation proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the components of the proposal. So we're really conducting a program evaluation proposal, which is really taking place in the form of an outline. And again, I'm Leslie Harris, Associate Professor at the Kent School of Social Work and Family Science. So the overall purpose of this second part of this assignment is to develop a structured program evaluation plan. So the components are an introduction, evaluation design, which is different than a research design. We're looking at data collection. We've really focused on qualitative data collection, but if you so choose, you can also put in validated measures to assess certain outcomes of your logic model in an evaluation design. We're going to talk about an analysis plan that could be qualitative or quantitative, meaning statistical analysis. And then lastly, conclusions and reflections on the whole process. All right, so we want to write your introduction, which is really building upon your initial discussion board exercises, so week 1 and week 2. So these will look a little bit familiar to you. So in order to propose an introduction, we want you to really define the problem that's being addressed in your program. So you've decided on the program through the needs assessment, you've talked about program implementation in the logic model, and now you are really defining holistically what problem exists that your program plans to address. So you're going to summarize the proposed strategy to address it, and this is going to be very brief. We want you to integrate the theory of change lens. So this will harken back to our discussion board exercise during week 2. This is where you reiterate the problem and the need to address the problem with the program or proposed strategy in your logic model. You're going to provide an analysis of the stated problem through the lens of the theory of change. You're going to include a description of the context in which the problem exists and any historical or current influences or issues that have impacted the problem. You can also bring a social justice, equity context into that description. Also include a brief description or exploration of the program theory that supports the existing context. So if you're using an evidence-based program, there should also be a theory, let's say within the SAMHSA guidelines or the CDC guidelines. So what is sort of the practice or program theory that leads to improved outcomes using this strategy? Next, I want you to brainstorm any barriers that have led to the problem or will impede potential change to the organizational systems. So just sort of thinking ahead and forward planning. So we want you to also choose an evaluation type, so either formative or outcome evaluation. I can say that about 90% of my students choose an outcome evaluation. This is really because outcome evaluation is very much linked to the logic models where we are exploring how we're going to look at increases and decreases of those selected outcomes from the logic model. So that is truly my advice. If through reading the Thomas and Campbell evaluation in Today's World textbook, you've really fallen in love with formative evaluation and see the need for it within the the context of your project, by all means, you can evaluate that way as well. We also want you to come up with a few key evaluation questions. This could be maybe one or two or three, but you want to make sure you're aligning those with your logic model outcomes. For example, what measurable changes can be expected based on the implementation of this program? Okay, the next is your research design, which is different. So you can choose from, let's keep it very basic, I would say qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods design. You can also look at experimental or quasi-experimental or non-experimental designs and implement that in the description of your research design. And those models are really laid out in your Thomas and Campbell book. We also want you to look at data collection measures. So this is where we want you to look at validated instruments and measures that can really be linked to your outcome. So for example, if you're implementing, let's say, a computer-assisted cognitive behavioral program, that addresses depression. You're going to want to look at the validated measures that are out there in the field that are commonly used to assess depression. For example, the Patient Health Questionnaire, also known as the PHQ-9, that could be a baseline measure that you could use to measure depression or assess depression in your participant population. You then implement your program, and then you measure again after the program, again using the PHQ-9 to assess if levels of depression have changed. So that would be an outcome measure. However, I don't want to pressure you at this point into having to think about complicated statistical analysis or really getting too overly involved in measures. At this point in your coursework, we really want you to just assess what are the validated measures that are out there, and do I really want to implement them? You can also, if you want to do a qualitatively driven evaluation, focus again on those qualitative methods you have learned through the first part of the semester, and you could maybe interview folks, conduct focus groups, look at document analysis. You could also count certain things. So for example, if you're looking at improving outcomes for workforce retention, you could count how many employees have left their workforce in the past 6 months, for example, or after the implementation of a workforce program, for example. So be creative. Also look at other models and designs and validated instruments and see what fits best for your design and the link to methods. I also want you to think about sample selection. So also thinking about ethical and diverse recruitment practices, just so that you have diverse voices and experiences represented in your program evaluation proposal. Next, we're going to look at data collection and measure. So this is really a follow through from the last slide where I want you to think about, well, what are my primary data sources going to be? How am I going to collect data? Do I want to do a survey with a validated instrument? Do I want to develop my own survey? Do I want to do interviews, focus groups? Do I maybe want to look at administrative records? So we want to decide here and lay out and cite if you're using a standardized or customized tool or assessment or measurement, for example, the PHQ-9, like I mentioned in the last slide. And I also want you to provide a justification for the tools used. By all means, this can also be another qualitative interview guide, but different than the needs assessment, you're going to be asking questions related to people's experiences with the given intervention or program that has been implemented. Okay, so examples could be standardized assessments to measure outcomes or customized tools and interview guides if you're taking a more qualitative approach. Okay, so next, we want you to lay out a very basic analysis plan. So this does not have to be in depth. At this point in your coursework, you are not expected to understand all the different types of statistical analysis that exist that will come in the future. What we would like you to know is that if you're using a standardized and validated quantitative measurement tool, there will be a statistical a test that will align with that. And if you're doing more of a qualitative proposal for program evaluation, that will be more of a thematic analysis. And by all means, if you want to get fancy and robust, you can combine qualitative and quantitative approach and propose doing a mixed methods analysis where you're proposing statistical analysis alongside thematic analysis and then integrating them through mixed methods approach. So my word of advice here is really matching the methods to your program outcomes. So look at that program outcomes list that you developed in your logic model, and then do some research and say, how are people measuring these things? Or how are people asking questions to get at change within these given constructs that I'm including in my program outcomes? Next, we're going to demonstrate efficacy. So we want to show how findings show program success and identify areas for improvement. So again, we're not asking you to produce findings, but we want you to highlight how these findings might indicate program success once the analysis is conducted in the future, because again, it is a proposal. Okay, lastly, we want you to focus on conclusions and reflections on the whole process. So briefly talk about a clear alignment with program goals. That can be a strength, and robust data collection and analysis methods. We also want you to address some limitations. So maybe what are some biases based on your positionality and reflexivity in the process? What resource constraints might you see coming up on the horizon that might impact the evaluation or implementation of your program? And then broader implications. So what have you learned all semester? What is the importance of program evaluation in human service organizations, and what will you really carry with you in your future work? All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. It was wonderful to work with you all, and please reach out at any time if you have any questions. Thank you so much. Bye.